Well, hello there. Welcome to Existential Sunday. If you are watching this via the replay, my name is Corey. I am a husband, I'm a father, I'm a podcast host, I'm a speaker, a writer, and I am the primary communicator here on Existential Sundays, which is a space that we have curated for people who are in the process of decolonizing or deconstructing either their faith or their worldview. So if that's you, or even if it's not you, but certainly if that's you, this is the place that you're welcome in, right? You might have found yourself as a person who had more questions about the world than answers, or maybe you found yourself in spaces where you had questions that weren't welcome, or you just weren't satisfied with the answers you were getting. This is a space for you because it's a space where we wrestle with the ideas that we all have about God and about humanity, and everyone has an idea about God. That's just reality. You either have an idea that God is benevolent and loving and kind and that there is a God, or you believe that there is not one. But we all have a belief one way or another about God. And this is a space where we can wrestle with those ideologies together. So those of you coming in live, good morning to you. I will come through and say hello to all of you in the comments on Facebook. And also, as always, just more housekeeping. As always, feel free to share this with anyone. You never have to ask my permission to share it. If you are watching me for the first time and you're like, I don't know you, you can wait to the end to share it. If you watch all the way to the end, I imagine that you would consider it shareable. And those of you on Facebook can tag your friends in the comments below. Hello to all of you. I'm really glad to be here with you this morning, or that we're with each other virtually. I want to talk today about something I've kind of come to realize this week is something that is fundamentally true for me, that I feel it feels very important, that I feel like I've been talking about without realizing that I've been talking about it. We all find ourselves in a space today in the world where we are recognized. We're either seeing it or participating in conflict, in confrontation, in people with different ideologies and different ways of thinking, trying to figure out how to cohabitate the world and how to arrange the world in a way that's fair and just. Now, I would say, I actually shouldn't say that we're all trying to do that, because I don't think everyone is actually trying to make sure that the world is arranged in such a way that's fair and just. There are people in the world who actually prefer the world arranged in such a way where they reap the benefits and other people are penalized. But if you are a person watching this, more than likely, again, going back to the idea of deconstructing and decolonizing, when you do that as a person of faith, I think you find yourself holding different ideologies than a lot of people that you've been in contact with. In fact, one of the reasons why people are so reluctant to change their thinking, even when new data is introduced to them, new information, new scientific discovery, even when those things are introduced, people find themselves shrinking back away from accepting new ideas, because sometimes accepting new ideas means that you have to leave the tribe that you've been accustomed to being in. It has some social drawbacks, I guess, if you will, because people who celebrated you or were in relationship with you, who believed and thought that you thought the same way that they do, and maybe they thought that you always would, they then turn to adversary sometimes to you. And so earlier this week, as I was thinking through the fact that as many of our brothers and sisters who are white, who are non-Black people of color, as well as certainly Black folks, have dealt with this pushback from people who are content with the world that is and afraid of the world that ought to be, I tweeted this: anti-racist brothers and sisters, let's stop arguing with racist people. And what I discovered this week is that part of being in community with people as you are deconstructing is that it's important to allow yourself permission to be deconstructing. that you're not deconstructed, that you're not decolonized, but that you are deconstructing and decolonizing. And when you give yourself that permission, you are less intimidated by people coming to you and saying, I think that you need to add some nuance to the statement you just made. And those of you that are on Facebook, you saw a full conversation I had with my dear friend, Andre Henry, as well as my dear friend, Nandi, who was in the comments. We were discussing the nuance of the statement that I made. And you guys can watch that later. But as I sit here and think about why I said what I said, in that tweet, there were actually reasons why I said we should stop arguing with racist people. And I'm not here to parse out who's racist and who's not. There is certainly nuance in understanding what that means, right? But when I listed things, the last thing I listed was this: that they drain the energy we need to topple white supremacy. This was the last statement that I made. And as I looked at it again, I thought, oh, that's the thing. That is the thing that the drum that I seem to always be beating in some way, shape or form. That's the thing the message that I'm shouting out there to my brothers and sisters who from decolonizing and deconstructing their faith or their worldview have moved into activism. Because I don't think that you can become a person, or I don't think that this process of deconstructing or decolonizing is a process that is stagnant. I think it's one that leads you to work. I think it's one that leads you to look at the world and say, I am no longer satisfied with the way things are arranged. I'm no longer content or okay with the way people are put in boxes in the world and the way we marginalize people based on the box that we have put them into. When you become a person who's not okay with that, then you become a person who's actively involved in working. And when you are actively involved in working, I think it's important that you manage your own energy, that you don't allow yourself to have your energy zapped from you, that you avoid people, places, activities that drain your energy, because it has a dramatic effect, not only on the work you're doing, but on who you are. I'll give you an example, right? Let me tell you the story from my childhood that's going to make some of you feel really sad for me. Some of you are just going to laugh at me, which is fine, because I'm laughing at myself. But some of you are going to feel really bad for me. But it's actually a really, really funny story. So I grew up, for part of my life, I grew up in the St. Louis area. We lived in East St. Louis on the, I don't know which side of the Mississippi River, but we lived on one side of the Mississippi River and St. Louis was on the other side. And we would cross the Mississippi River every year for the VP fair that they'd have downtown St. Louis by the St. Louis Arch. And from the river to the St. Louis Arch, there's like these stairs. At least there was when I was growing up. There were these stairs and they go to a platform and then to more stairs. I don't know where my parents or my brothers were, but for some reason, I went by myself to one of these platforms between the St. Louis Arch and the Mississippi River. And I went into a full-on impromptu MC Hammer dance routine. I don't know why I did it. I mean, I am not a graceful person. I don't have a graceful golf swing. I don't have graceful dance moves. I don't know why I was doing this. I was a kid. I was free. I was living freely and I was exercising my right to dance. And I was Gregory Hines and MC Hammer and whoever else is a great dancer that we could mention. I was out. That was me on this platform, just like, boom, You can see how not graceful I am, right? Well, here's what happened next. There were these people who were older than me. I don't know if they were college age or not. There was two guys and two women, and they were walking by, and one of the guys looked up at me and pointed, like they were walking by the river, and pointed at me and started laughing hysterically while saying, "What is he doing?" And he was laughing so hard that and ridiculing me so bad that one of the women he was with grabbed him and pulled him away. And in my mind, as like this 13-year-old boy, I see I hear laughter and ridicule being dragged off into the darkness by my personal hero, who I don't even know who she is, but she saved me from getting more ridicule. But I will say that moment deflated and drained me of my energy to dance. To this day, I don't dance. Well, I shouldn't be dancing, but still, you get the point. What I'm saying. To this day, if I'm dancing in front of people, there's a little bit of subconsciousness. Even getting on stage in front of people to sing or speak, there's a little bit of subconsciousness. It's like, are they going to make fun of me? And when I tweeted what I tweeted earlier this week, I was thinking about all of us who are now engaged with friends and family, or maybe people who aren't even our friends, who can zap us of our energy, who can say things or do things that can take the energy that we should be focusing and harnessing to contend for a better world. And we instead use that energy to question ourselves, to doubt ourselves, to wonder if we are extreme, to wonder if we are, in fact, heretics or whatever other terminology, or divisive, whatever other terminology may come our way. And I think it's important that we manage our energy better. I'm going to put it up again. You have to manage your own energy. And in having a conversation with my dear brother, Andre Henry, he reminded me of a story from the Hebrew Bible, from the book of Nehemiah, and the whole story of Nehemiah. And he said, you should read Nehemiah. I was like, okay, Andre, I'll read Nehemiah. In fact, he told me he is working on a project that we are all waiting for, anticipating Andre's project on Nehemiah. But he's working on a project on Nehemiah. And so I've started reading it. And in chapter 3, I found this really interesting story that I think sort of applies to where we are today, and what I'm talking about today, this whole idea of managing energy. So I'm going to give you a 30,000 foot view of the story of Nehemiah. If you want to read the story of Nehemiah, feel free to do so. But Nehemiah is a guy a Jewish man, post-Jewish exile, who is made aware that his homeland is in ruins. And Nehemiah, that doesn't sit well with Nehemiah. Nehemiah, from his position, he had a position where he was cupbearer to the king, which was this like sort of lofty position that he had in life. And from that position, he was like, I'm not comfortable sitting here when I know that my homeland lies in ruins. And so Nehemiah set out to go and rebuild his homeland. He went to rebuild a wall in his homeland. The wall was torn down. He went to build it back. And as he's early on in this process, as the story goes, some guy whose name you can read in Nehemiah chapter 3 gets angry at the project that Nehemiah is working on. And he begins to ridicule Nehemiah. He begins to look at Nehemiah and say, what you're doing is stupid. What you're doing shouldn't be done. What you're doing is will do more harm than good. Who do you think you are? Sound familiar? When you decided that like you were going to speak out against racism, did you not have people in coming to you, whether you did it on Facebook or in person? Did you not have people coming to you, lobbing accusations at you, calling you divisive? By the way, I wrote a piece on that this week that you may want to read, about why we should embrace that terminology, why we should wear that as a badge of honor if you're a person who considers yourself to be, or not, let me not say considers yourself to be. If you are a person who is actively acting as an anti-racist, you should embrace the divisive title. But does it not sound familiar? What's happening to Nehemiah in this story, that like Nehemiah gets some people together and they start trying to do something that they feel is just. They're trying to rebuild what was torn down by oppressive nations, what was broken down and destroyed. They're trying to rebuild the dignity of their people. They're trying to restore a sense of home and pride. And people who don't like their project came along to say, you should stop doing that. You're wrong. So some ancient gaslighting that was happening. And we find this happening right now, today, in our lives, whenever we have the courage to stand up against oppression. We see this not just in rhetorical form. Look at what's happening in Portland. Look at the president just this past week dispatched more federal agents to Milwaukee. Portland is probably just the tip of the iceberg for when people begin to stand up and say no to oppression, to say no to injustice, which is the activity of any person of faith, mind you. Any person who is, again, deconstructed or decolonized, you find yourself going, the world's not right. There's more to the world that we can push for. There's a better way of being that we can find in the world if we can gather together, if the people of the world can gather together and figure out a way to arrange the world in a way that makes space for everyone. As you deconstruct, you start to think that's possible. Well, when you start to push back against the regimes that like things the way that they are, not only rhetorically, but physically, you see secret police, militarized police moving in to squash the efforts of people to fight for justice. And I want to just show you what I believe. This is Corey's thoughts on this. And there's tons of ideas out there about how to resist. I just want to give you an example from Nehemiah that I saw and how Nehemiah responded to people who came to him in Nehemiah chapter 3, ridiculing him harshly, and how he maintained his energy. Number one, in the story, and you can read it, Nehemiah didn't engage. Nehemiah did not engage with the people that were ridiculing his work. Nehemiah kept on working, listened, heard what they were saying, but Nehemiah didn't engage. He didn't jump. He didn't come run and defend. He didn't start lobbing accusations back. He didn't go back and forth and tit for tat with the people ridiculing him. Now, let me say this about this, because this does need some nuance. There are, if we talk specifically about race and racism, there are white brothers and sisters and non-Black people of color who are advocates of Black Lives Mattering, who feel it's your calling and have been told it's your calling to engage your relatives and your friends in these conversations and debates and dialogues about race and racism. I'm not telling you not to do that. Continue to do that. Here's what I am telling you, that if your gut is telling you that you're dealing with a person who is not willing, who just wants to stop your work, they're not willing to ever join you in the work. They consistently want you to stop your work because your work makes them uncomfortable, and your gut is telling you that, to quote the great Maya Angelou, if your gut is telling you that this is a person who I should believe the first time, then you should believe this person the first time and move on to someone else. Don't stop the work, which I'll get to in a moment. You don't stop working. And just because I tell you not to engage, it doesn't mean you stop working. It means that you trust your gut and say, this person is not worth the energy that it's taking me to engage with them, so I'm not going to engage. And here's something I want to let you guys all off the hook for when it comes to your gut. We often hear people say, trust your gut, and you're afraid because you might be wrong if you trust your gut. Yeah, you will be wrong sometimes. You in this way of living where you go, hey, my gut's telling me something inside me that is telling me this person doesn't pass, as my friend Donald George will say, the smell test. This person, something about them, something about my interaction with them is telling me that they are not a person who's ever going to join in the work of anti-racism or join in the work of faith that is resisting oppression. So my energy is not, I'm not the one. Maybe somebody else could come along, but I'm not the one. And you know what? Sometimes you'll be wrong in that, but that's okay. It's okay. You're better off trusting your gut, because more often than not, your gut's going to be telling you exactly the right thing. I think that's the spirit of what Maya Angelou was saying, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. The second thing that Nehemiah did that I want to kind of parse for us, because I know that there are some people of faith who watch, and there are people who don't consider themselves to be a person of faith. Some people who believe in God, some people who are agnostic, some people who don't believe in God, all potentially watching Existential Sunday. The next thing that happens is really interesting, is that Nehemiah begins to pray this prayer that God would basically be the judge between him and these people ridiculing him. In fact, Jeremiah says, don't let these people off the hook. He's basically praying to God that these people be punished for making fun of him. Here's what I would say. You may want to pray that God punishes people who make fun of you, or people who try to drain your energy or try to stop your progression towards a better world, or our progression towards a better world. You may want to pray that. That's fine. I mean, if that's, it's all throughout the scriptures, we see prayers like that. When we talk about praying for our enemy, it's not always that we're going, oh God, I pray that you bless my enemy, because that's not real. We're not there. So if you're going to pray for an enemy, pray honest prayers about an enemy, right? So you may go there, but what I'm extracting from this, as I look at Nehemiah, and the second act that he took was to pray. It is to say, we can allow time, we can allow history to determine who's on the right side of it. And in the last year, what we've seen, just as an example, in the last year, what we've seen is Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed went from being the demonized and ostracized, still being ostracized, but from demonized to how could you kneel during the national anthem, to seeing managers of professional baseball teams kneeling next to their players, to seeing Black Lives Matter on the pitching mound of America's pastime, to us now seeing the NBA with Black Lives Matter spelled out on the basketball court. We have moved to a place where I believe we're starting to see that the folks back in 2016 who were lamenting police brutality, who were lamenting race and racism, not race, but racism, who were lamenting inequality and systemic oppression, all along were on the right side of history. I think there's something divine about the right side of history, about being on the side of history that sided with the oppressed, who sided with the equality of all mankind, and could recognize ways that people were being stripped of their dignity in their lives, and being oppressed and being forced to live at suboptimal, substandard ways of living. I think we can see that over time, we start to see the people like MLK and Malcolm X, and Ella Baker, and Rosa Parks, and Fannie Lou Hamer, who were on the right side of history. I think that as I look at what Nehemiah was doing, that Nehemiah was reaching into something divine to say, I'm not going to engage, but I am going to trust in the nature of divinity, whatever you call divinity, whatever you may think is divine. And even if you're a person who doesn't believe in God, I think that there's probably a goodness perhaps that you believe in, that thing, whatever that is, ultimately will lead us to a better world. That virtuous thing, that I'm going to believe that the work I'm doing is in alignment with the divine virtue of the universe, and I'm going to keep at it. The last thing Nehemiah did was that Nehemiah kept working. Some of the concern of my friends from my tweet about anti-racist brothers and sisters not arguing with racist people was not only just the binary of racist, non-racist, which was a really, really helpful clarification. To talk about racism from a spectrum and not a binary was super helpful. But also that some folks would see that as an opportunity to stop working. The example of Nehemiah is that when Nehemiah decided not to engage with people who were detracting from the work and ridiculing the work, And when Nehemiah decided that I'm going to leave this up to the divine to determine between me and you who's right, Nehemiah decided to continue to work. I'm saying to all of us that the reason last week I told you to do something that you enjoy, for those of you that watched last week's Existential Sunday, I talked about enjoying your life, was about continuing the work. The reason 2 weeks ago I talked to you about who you surround yourself with and about, you know, what friendship actually is and what it means to have friends in your life was so that you would continue the work. The reason I do Existential Sunday and the podcast is not to give anyone the sense that we shouldn't be doing the work, but it's that we should be, as we do the work, again, hearkening back to what we talked about from the wisdom literature of the Hebrew scriptures last week, that as we do the work, we should also enjoy our lives. We should also be surrounded with good friends and people who can tell us the truth and people for whom we can tell the truth. That is a part of it, but it's never that we don't continue the work. We can pause from the work, and we should pause from the work to remind ourselves that we are not a perpetual generator of energy in and of ourselves. That's not what we are as human beings, but the work itself should continue. The work is too important. The work is too valuable to stop doing. The work is too valuable for my energy to be wasted on people who my gut and Maya Angelou are telling me are not people who are coming with us on the journey. So I should move on to other folks. Again, those of you, let me be very clear, those of you who are, who feel, and there are some people of color who I know of who feel like it's their job to educate white folks on race and racism. That's fine. That's what you feel like you're supposed to do. Continue that work. But sometimes you may find a person who is so committed to the status quo that your interaction with them will only take energy away from you that you need to go help other people who are more willing to move. That's all I have for you today, folks. I hope this made sense. I hope that, like, there were things that I said you were able to connect to. Again, those of you that are watching this live right now, I'm going to come through and say hello to all of you on Facebook. I'm going to tap in and say hi to you. I'm going to wave like this as I'm waving now. Listen, if you are a part of the Patreon community, I always want to tell you thank you for doing that. I so appreciate all of you who are part of that community. Your encouraging words and of course, your financial support is amazing. Thank you so much for staying consistent with that and continuing month after month to do that. If you are a person who's watching this and you are not a part of the Patreon community as of yet, but you'd like to be, the link to that is in the comments below, and you are more than welcome to join that community and be a part of what we are doing to contend for a better world. With that being said, if you've watched this for 28 minutes on the replay, I would assume that this is something that you felt was inspiring or worth your time. It's probably worth the time of others also, so feel free to share this with whomever you'd like to. All right, folks, I appreciate you so much.